Okay, good evening, everyone. I welcome you to our spring selection, our spring offerings for radical self-care. For those of you who are brand new, I want to explain how this came about. Fall of last year, I invited just Black faculty and staff. I just sent just an email, just sent it out because during this pandemic, during March, April, May, I felt that if I came back to iState in the state of mind that I was in, I was going to need some people to talk to. So I knew I needed radical self-care. So, and that's basically a way for you to look at yourself first before you start to help others. The term was coined by Angela Davis, and I totally give her credit, but the concept is not new. So the conversations continue. It is split up in 3 areas: mind, body, and spirit. We've covered mind. Now we're on body. And that's where I think we have 2 more sessions for body, and then we'll go to spirit. So it has a focus to what it's talking about, but we also want to hear your input at the end of the series to tell us what do we need to talk about now, because this conversation will continue. Dr. Leslie is a 2-timer, so she was involved in the fall. Iris and Oyibo, and I'll introduce both. They are new staff members. So I am totally honored that they just rushed in and came aboard with a little less than 2 or 3 months at iState. So I thank you all. So let me make mention, we have giveaways. Any student that attends, they're more than welcome. We have books, we have a living or a constant changing workbook that it's a digital. Chantrice is online. She has since left us, but she created that for us. And we have t-shirts, we have, you name it, we have giveaways, and students will be pulled, names will be pulled, or the panelists can choose students randomly that answer a question or something. So today is acknowledging mental health. So this is about the physicality, but the one thing I want to mention, your body, your physical, your body, mind, and spirit, they're connected. They work interchangeably. So you may see things that cross over, and mental health is more of the mind too, but it can be the body, it can be physicality. So you can definitely read the description. I will not read this all. Dr. Leslie King, Dr. Afoaku, and Iris Mosah. Did I say that right? Mosah?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, because I will just like destroy people's names. So I appreciate that. I'm going to share their bios quickly. Here's Dr. King. And Dr. King, how long have you been at iState now?
Oh my gosh, I've actually had 3 lives at Indiana State. My first stint, I was in the registrar's office. Basically, at those times, they called us clerks, for 12 years. Then I went to financial aid as an assistant director, went to Ivy Tech as their regional registrar, came back to ISU as assistant registrar, and have taught adjunct at both Indiana State and Ivy Tech. I am pretty much a lifelong learner and a lifelong educator and student services person.
Okay, excellent. There's Cheryl Moore. I just wanted her to give her that due because she's been here. She's been and gone and been back.
Right.
Iris is a new staff member in the Student Counseling Center. You can read her bio. She will share more about herself. I think, Iris, how long have you been here?
I began at ISU on September 1st, officially as a full-time employee, but I actually attended ISU for my master's from 2017 to 2019. So I left for a year, worked in Indianapolis, and have returned to ISU.
Okay, welcome home.
Thank you.
And Dr. Oyibo, she's our newest, I do believe. Dr. Oyibo, when did you start back? You have to unmute.
Yeah, I came in October. Yeah, so I came in to work as in the student accessibility resource office. I always have passion to work with students or young people or older people, as the case may be. And but I received my PhD from here, from Indiana State. So it was good to come home and be part of my school again.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, I think I have done all of my parts. Radical self-care, this is the next one coming down the pipeline. So I will send you numerous emails. Yolanda Williams is our next facilitator. Now, with that said, I am going to stop my share and I will hand it over to our facilitators. Thank you once again.
Okay, we've divided our segment into 3 different areas that each of us will speak about. Oyibo is actually going to start out the presentation, and she's going to kind of look at the history of systemic racism in the United States and how it has contributed to, because this is Black History Month, we want to start with that, how it has contributed possibly to, mental health issues. I mean, there are many triggers. So, Oyibo.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone, and I'm happy to be here. And Dr. Yolanda, Elvin, thank you for inviting me and including me. I feel very welcomed. Well, I think today I thought that to discuss this topic, there is always a history to everything. And if we don't know where our history began or where the problem began, we will never know how to solve the problem. And I thought that it would be good to maybe refresh our memory again about the history of this country. For one thing, we all know that this country, before 1776, had 13 colonies, and they were called United Colonies. And those 13 colonies, by 1776, became the United States of America, when they became a country, when we eventually freed ourselves from Britain, from colonialism. But then it's very interesting that at the founding of this great nation, we wrote a constitution, we decided to become a country, but we did not include everybody. And that was the beginning of institutionalized racism that we are seeing till today. And as people who have been marginalized, and I mean Black people or African people at the time, this affects your whole being, whether we're thinking about our spiritual being or our mental health, our physical health, everything. Because every day you are reminded that you were excluded. Even though we were all here, this society was supposed to be a multicultural country from the founding day, because everybody was here. Black people, apart from Native Americans, Black people were already here before European Americans arrived, when Christopher Columbus came in 1492. So, if you look at everything, we were supposed to be a multicultural country, a multicultural society. But only a very small percentage of the population formulated the Constitution, wrote the Constitution, wrote who should qualify to be a citizen and not. And by doing so, only white males, Protestant white males, were qualified to be citizens. And those who made themselves comfortable at the expense of the rest. And then today we talk about the founding fathers, we talk about who they are. But then have we really stopped to say to ourselves, how about the founding mothers? We're not teaching classes, history classes, about the founding mothers of the United States. People like Abigail Adams, Teresa Otis, Tubman, Harriet Tubman, so many of them, many women who worked very hard to help to build this country and bring it to what it is today. So when you look at that, then you say, how about why did it take that long until the 1960s, until the civil rights movement, for when Black people then said, no, we're tired of being marginalized, stigmatized, labeled, and all the rest of them. We want to belong. We have been given a bad check by the United States, and we want this addressed. And then it took up to the 1960s, the civil rights movement, for us to address race relations, to address the fact that Black people had been here for a long time, but they were excluded. Just like the rest were excluded. Women were excluded, Asians were excluded, Native Americans who were even here first were excluded, everybody else was excluded. So when you look at all these problems, you then realize that, hey, this is the beginning of our problems. This is why we have problem with race relations in this country. And I want to also remind everyone, including myself, that race is a social construction. There was nothing like race and racism before in human history until the 19th century. And some people in Europe decided to coin the word race and racism to use it to justify the oppression of everybody else except Europeans themselves, of course. And then we began to hear about the word race and then racism. And then with that came about who is a superior race, who is an inferior race, and the list goes on. So I think that what I am trying to do is to say that our constitution that we have today is not really inclusive. It wasn't, but it should have been inclusive from the beginning, because by 1776, this society was a very multicultural society. You had Africans, you had Asians, you had Europeans, you had Native Americans, you had women, you had men. Everybody was here. And then we'll talk about, for example, going to school. We go to school from K through 16, but then what does the textbooks teach us about our own history? Why are we still afraid of each other? Instead of seeing each other as Americans, as citizens, as residents, as friends. Rather, we see each other as this Black woman or that Asian woman and so on. And when we look at the textbooks, we have not been taught well. And that's why somebody has said lies, wrote about the lies his teacher taught him or told him, because the teachers have not really done a good job of teaching everybody's history and experiences and contributions to the founding and building of this great nation. So if we look at the textbooks, we have not really studied the history of African Americans, for example. This is Black History Month. Why did we come about having Black History Month? Because our history had been thrown away. Our experiences were thrown away. Our contributions to this great nation had been thrown away. That White House was built by enslaved Africans. Look up the history. So many things that the kids should have learned from K to 12 and then in college were excluded from the curriculum. The curriculum should be inclusive of everybody's history, contributions, and experiences, but it's not. That's not the case. Rather, when we teach about the founding fathers, you only hear about a couple of people. How about the rest? Frederick Douglass, who nobody talks about him, but he was a founding father. He was my founding father. So, so I think we have to think about our curriculum. Is it not time we think about what kind of curriculum do we have? What kind of history do we learn in school from K to 12 through college? I think it's time we talk about social construction. Since race is a social construction, can't we also throw it away and say, hey, we're tired of this? This word was just an artificial word. It didn't exist all along. And some people just came up with it. And today we're so absorbed by that. We talk about race, this race or that race. I remember a woman sharing her experience. She was coming from one of the countries in Latin America, from Jamaica. But she's a European though, European African. So she got into the US. She was asked to fill out a form. And then she saw, you have to choose a race. She was confused. And she was like, what? What is race? What do I choose? Why? Because, this is the only country where we nurture race and racism, we pamper it, we make sure it doesn't disappear, it doesn't go away. But it looks like it's time we have to rethink about some of these things we have created, the monster we have created, which is race and racism. Since we made racism, we can also dismantle racism. I believe that because we did it, we can also say we are tired of it. And last year, for example, we saw all the things that happened in our country. How George Floyd died in Minnesota just because he was a Black man. And because of those issues, it's time for us to say we're tired of this race and racism. On January 6th, we had the insurrection in the Capitol, and 5 people died for no reason, just because some people think that this country belongs to them alone and nobody else. So I think these are the things I'm looking at. And then if you look at the words very well, for example, Black, some people are labeled Black with that negative connotation to go with it, which affects our mental state every day. Because every day you're reminded that you're a Black person, you are not superior, you're not good. And we know it's not true. One of the reasons we were enslaved in the US was because we had a lot of skills. Africans were first before anybody else in everything. We were in Greece during Greek civilization. We were here in the US during American civilization. We were everywhere. So we know that we are not inferior people. But then the young people are being taught that Black is negative. But as you know, no human being is Black, like the monitor screen, TV screen. Nobody's Black like that. And then some people think they are white. White is superior. But white is like snow. Is anyone really that color, white? Or like white pepper? You can see that these are just artificial words, artificial colors. Nobody's really that color. So, I will not take too much of your time, but I thought that it was time to look back to our history to know how we had begun this journey as a country and how we got to where we are today and why we have all these issues as far as race and race relations. Native Americans had their own share of the racism and the discrimination and labeling and stigmatization. Asian Americans had their own, everybody. So why do we still keep this word and live by it and treat each other bad? We should all be one country. Thank you.
You're on mute, Dr. King.
I can't do anything to unmute you, Dr. King. You're going to have to do that. Oyibo, thank you. That was extremely informative and to the point. So I definitely appreciate that. And while we're waiting on Dr. King to join us, are you?
I'm good. I knew once I hit that I would struggle. So forgive me, as my kids would say, Mom, seriously. Leah, I see you laughing. Okay, so I wanted to continue with the conversation, that Oyibo started, and to focus not only on the African American experience, but mental health all over, as a wider construct. As many of you may or may not know, mental illness is very common. About 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health issue. And, in this country, we need to do a better job in addressing that. The first part of my discussion is about labels. When I grew up, there was not a lot known about mental illness. And I grew up with people who probably ended up having diagnoses that could be helped and assisted were called such labels as crazy, nutty, psycho, even mental health as we know it. There's a term just, they're mental. Someone is mental, or they're loopy, those are the type of labels that disparage people from getting help. And those are the type of labels that we need to get away from. And I think we're starting to open up a conversation where we realize that sometimes, in your life, you feel things that just don't seem right. And that doesn't mean you're crazy or loopy or, insane or whatever whatever label someone throws at you. All that does is prevent you from seeking assistance. And again, I'm talking from a time period that I grew up, which is the 60s. So, don't laugh, it was the 60s. And part of that time period that I'm now realizing as an adult, I grew up in a family with secrets. We were told that you don't go to school and talk about what goes on in this house. My mom, I remember I just now found out years later that she actually sought therapy at a time. And, they would always refer to, her having a nervous condition or taking nerve pills. And I'm like, I know, Mom, you told me 10 times I'm getting on your nerves. So, is that part of it? But that was just the way that people described what they didn't understand at that time. And I think it's so important that particularly the young people, in your generation, and I think you're in a better spot than I was, where we are finally seeing people standing up and talking about their experiences, whether it's a physical situation like an eating disorder. I know that I suffer from acute anxiety, and I fought for many years not to get assistance because my childhood taught me that you cannot appear weak. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to face every situation. When I started college, I was a full-time working mom of 3. I was a non-traditional student. I came back to college probably at about 24, 25. So I was working full time, and I had, 3 little ones at home. And when I say little, they were under the age of 5. So, naturally there's going to be anxiety and stress and, and sometimes a little bit of depression, depending upon our economic situation. And I didn't have an outlet. I didn't understand what to do with that because I was taught that you don't talk to anybody outside our family. You don't talk to anybody outside our family. And I believe, as Dr. Oyibo stated, in the African-American community, that was something that was taught. And a lot of that had to do with what she described as, the experiences of my parents, my grandparents. There was just not an outlet for them as African-Americans, to talk about those sorts of things because they were overlooked in those systems of mental health. It was, we were lucky to be able to just get to the doctor and have immunizations as a child. It wasn't, so I suppressed a lot of things, which I believe added to my own personal journey. My personal journey of kind of trying to fight this thing. I was not supposed to be someone who was weak. I'm supposed to, to survive and at all costs. And we now know that it's not you, there is assistance out there, and there is help for people who, who have anxieties and worries. I mean, we used to just talk about it as chronic worrying, which lends itself to anxiety. And if it goes on long enough, it can put you in a sense of depression. So, the biggest point that I want to make is a lot of times our own families put us in a situation where, we learn that, that mental illness is a bad thing. And it's a human thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a human thing. We have things in our lives that come at us from all sides. I mean, all of us in this room survived 2020, I hope. So, you talk about that. I mean, and you guys as students were stripped out of your classrooms and put online within a week. And we as employees, had to adjust to the same thing. So as far as the family secrets, what I would love to see, and I really do see it happening, is to remove the stigma and stop labeling people, and just support them, whether they are your brothers and sisters, or your friends who should feel comfortable confiding in you, and not have fear that all of a sudden, they're going to have a stamp on their forehead that says they're not okay. Because sometimes having a bad day or, feeling vulnerable, it doesn't define you. It doesn't define you for the rest of your life. And I got to a point as an adult when my children became older that I wanted them to be comfortable. And, because I was in a marriage that wasn't good. And my kids, obviously, you can't hide those sorts of things from children. And there were counselors at school. And I encouraged my kids, if you feel like you have to go talk to the counselor, go ahead and do that. So it wasn't that my parents were bad. It was just, that was their generation and how they dealt with things. I wanted to change it in my kids' generation. And part of my kids' generation, I'll tell you, was when they started the reality shows. I can't remember some of the you guys are a little bit younger than my girls, but when they started having some of the reality shows where young people would live in a house together and they would go through different situations, and I was just shocked at how outward they were in expressing how they felt, and because I was not brought up that you didn't talk about things like that out loud, and you certainly didn't share those sorts of things. So I see that as a good thing, because I feel like my kids are millennials, and so now we're at I don't know if are we at the Z generation? I don't know, but I really believe that that from the millennials on, because I'm a baby boomer, you guys have really had a great opportunity just to recognize that it's not you. It's a lot of circumstances. There are triggers. There are things that put us in situations where we may not feel that we are at our best. So, the major points I want to bring to light is we need to be cognizant. We need to be aware of labels that are negative. We need to be supportive to our friends and family. We need to tell them that it's okay, that there is assistance available. Another thing that, again, this goes hand in hand with what Oyibo was saying, and I go back to Black history or the Black experience, because I am Black, so I can only speak from that standpoint. It was more of an economic thing. We didn't have those type of outlets. I didn't know anyone in my neighborhood who saw a therapist. And so it was almost like a taboo subject. And, we would wonder what's wrong with that person. So, my hope is that we are getting to a point in this nation, this country, this city, this town, that we are more open, and we can guide our friends and family to seek assistance when they need it, because we need to get out of the secretive ways that we were brought up, and share the way we feel. And a lot of times, the one thing I realized when I started opening up and sharing with others, oh my God, I'm not alone. Somebody else has experienced this. Somebody else, and that's what we do when we don't share. We isolate ourselves, and we think we're the only person who's ever experienced some feeling that has made us feel less than who we are. Or we get up, and we're not feeling as if we can make it through the day. And that's okay. And I'm learning that. So, I've had to kind of retrain myself, if you will, retrain myself and recognize that it's okay to share. I will share with you guys here today. I mean, I grew up in a family where my father was an alcoholic. And that was definitely hush, hush, whisper, whisper. And, and that had a profound effect on me. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what outlets. And because of that, there were other circumstances that came into play that certainly affected our economic well-being, because he couldn't hold a job for a very long time. So there's many aspects to mental health. I'll go ahead and finish this up and just indicate to you some of the areas that mental health can affect us. Housing, we are seeing people in the pandemic who are being evicted. Housing is a mental health issue. If you don't have a safe place to lay your head at night or to provide, for your family, you're going to experience issues that will, affect your mental health. Food insecurity, whether you've experienced that or not, there are people today who don't know where their next meal is coming from. There are families now who were middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class, who've never had to ask for assistance, and now they do have to. Healthcare again is another issue, and that is a mental health issue, because as I indicated earlier, a lot of times families I grew up didn't have health insurance, and certainly didn't have health insurance that covered therapy, that covered an introduction into sessions where they could go and talk about that. Just, that wasn't at the top of the list to get through. Wages are a mental health issue. We know that women are paid less than men in many circumstances, or women are overlooked for promotions, and it's still happening today. Single mothers who have people, children to take care of. This pandemic and the debate that goes on every day to open schools, whether it's safe or not, if you're a working mother and you're the only income coming in that house and the schools are closed, that's going to affect you affect your mental well-being. Childcare, again, single parents or even dual working parent households. If you don't have safe childcare, reliable, safe childcare for your children, that is a mental health issue. It's going to affect you. So I'll go ahead and reiterate, we need to watch and be careful of the labels that we are putting out. People are not cuckoo. They're not crazy. Well, there are times I can be crazy, but but in a fun way, not in a way that affects, where I'm really asking for help. Don't label people. Be that friend who says, what's going on? What can I do to help? I'll go with you. Family secrets, as you start, you young ladies that I see here, as you start your family, allow your kids to speak their mind, allow them to say what's going on. Try to be non-judgmental, and don't expect your kids to, deal with things maybe the way you did. Like, oh, well, I handled that. I don't know why you can't. Everybody is individual, and everybody is affected in different ways by different situations. Try not to be your parents in that respect. I made it a conscious point not to be my parents in terms of keeping secrets and not sharing, how I felt, and keeping the family secrets, of, in some cases, domestic violence, in other cases, alcoholism and economic situations that really, really plagued us. And again, remove the stigma from getting help. Be an advocate, find out where local assistance is, and particularly if it is on an affordable basis. We really need to be the agents of change that we would want. So with that, I will hand it over to our mental health expert, Iris, who is a master's are you clinical psychology, Iris?
A master's in clinical mental health counseling.
Okay.
Yes, so thank you so much, Oyibo and Dr. King. I think your portions of the presentation are so important, because we have to have an understanding of history and how things came to be in order to kind of understand where we are now, why we are the way we are now, and ways that, we still have to go in this journey of destigmatizing mental health issues. Because like you said, Dr. King, we all have mental health, every single one of us. Now, the quality of our mental health might differ, but it's usually never because of one single thing. Like Dr. King said, it could be some of your socioeconomic circumstances that are now contributing to the quality of your mental health. It could be a trauma that you experienced that has had an impact on your mental health. It could be your feelings of safety in your immediate environment or even your society. Like Oyibo mentioned during her presentation, it has an impact on your mental well-being when you are occupying a space or an institution or a society where you know that, you're viewed in a negative light, or you're viewed as inferior, or other people don't feel like you belong there. All of that can have an impact on mental health. So just kind of going back and bridging the gap between the history and present day, like was mentioned earlier, I would say from like the 16th to the early 19th century, I'm sure you guys have probably seen this, heard this, read about it in old literature, but during that time, there were no medical names for mental health conditions. And when we don't understand something and we don't have a formal name for it, we as humans come up with our own, whether or not they are accurate or positive or stigmatizing. So back then, before there were, these scientific names for different mental health conditions, you were seen as loony or crazy, or mad is another one they used. They even had, like, the early psychiatric hospitals were called mad houses, so even though those names had that stigmatizing connotation, it was the only name that they had. Those were the only names that they had. And so things didn't really start to change in that regard until about the 1950s. So in 1952, we had our first DSM. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen this or, been able to look through this before, but this is called, for short, the DSM. It is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manuals of Mental Disorders. So now we have a formal book that classifies, all the different mental disorders that we have recognized to be mental health conditions. And this book, while it helps us a lot, we can't look at it and we can't use it without acknowledging its history and the Eurocentric history of it. So it was created in 1952, the first version, but it was created by all white men who were psychiatrists. And because of that, a lot of the disorders that are in here currently, but also especially in the first versions, all of those disorders were basically things that those white professional men deemed as straying away from the norm. And what was the norm? It was a white heterosexual individual. So in other words, if you didn't fit that mold, you were considered to have some kind of mental health disorder. And I'll give you an example. In the first couple versions of the DSM, homosexuality was in the book as a mental disorder. And so as culture changes, culture evolves, things become more accepted in, widespread culture, then we think about, the idea that, hey, maybe this isn't a mental health disorder. Maybe this is just how this person is. And it's not the exact same as, these 20 white men who wrote this book. There is diversity among us, and that's okay. There is no normal. We're all different, and deviating from that idea of normal does not make you, it doesn't make you sick. And so we are trying to continue to work on, bringing that narrative. But I would definitely say that, the origins of the DSM and the origins of what's normal and what's not stays with us today. For example, so we're on the 5th version of this book now, but there is a disorder in here that a lot of mental health professionals have a problem with. And I don't know if it's going to be in the next version. We don't know. Maybe there's conversation around it being removed, but we won't know until it's published. But there's a disorder in here called premenstrual Dysport disorder. And it is basically it's basically PMSing. So there's been conversation around the fact that why is this a mental health disorder? We get it. This book was written by these white men who didn't experience periods, but women experience periods, and it's a normal thing. We know some of the biological reasons behind why we experience the PMS, that we do. And so, what makes it worthy of being in this book? So there's conversations like that are still ongoing around some of the disorders that are in here. Another one that stands out to me is depression, some of the stigma that continues to exist around depression. So you may have also heard this in old movies or books or whatever, but depression, before we had the term depression, we used to allude to it as hysteria. And that was usually only used for women who were seen as overly emotional or weepy. You were seen as hysterical. So now we have the term depression, but because of the origins of the word hysteria, I think a lot of mental health professionals and even society in general, I think they really, what's the word I'm looking for? Feminize depression. And they, a lot of people view it as a woman's disease. And yes, statistically, women are diagnosed more with depression, but sometimes I wonder if, a lot of that has to do with the fact that this stigma does exist, and that depression in men often manifests very differently than what it looks like in a woman. Sometimes, when men are depressed, they do experience, the sadness, excessive crying, things like that. But a lot of times depression in men manifests as anger and aggressive behavior. Maybe they're seen as someone who lashes out. And if we're not careful about that as mental health professionals, we're quick to dismiss it as depression and, instead start thinking about a conduct disorder or a personality disorder, something like that. So that's just another example of how that stigma can still impact the work we do today, which obviously isn't helpful for individuals when we're misdiagnosing them. And even something else that I think is worth pointing out. So I don't know the exact statistic, but I do know for a fact that young Black boys in schools are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with a conduct disorder, whereas their white male counterparts are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD, even though they're demonstrating similar behaviors. And I mean, you guys tell me, but that sounds like, prejudice and bias that is, manifesting in the ways that we are conceptualizing our students from different backgrounds. So those are just some of the challenges that we continue to have, and that is just very important for us as mental health clinicians to be aware of. We're constantly trying to work on improving our cultural competence. And that's a journey that never ends, because culture is ever changing with its people. So that's just an important area of continued growth. And some of the ways that we try and implement that cultural competence is by never making assumptions about our clients. Just because someone presents and they look a certain way, or they say they're from a certain town or a certain background or religious affiliation, whatever, you can never make assumptions, because everyone's experience of their culture is different. And it's a disservice that, you know, we would do to our clients to try and put them in a box just because they have a certain label or a certain name. So those are some of the challenges we have now around diagnoses, but I also do want to spend some time just highlighting some of the positives that have come from us being able to put names to mental health disorders and to be able to classify them. It's not all bad. And I know because of the history of labels and diagnoses, they're often viewed in a negative light, but the reality is that by having diagnoses, it brings a lot of comfort to some people, number one. So I have worked with clients who, you know, who feel as though finally having a name for what they're experiencing is just so comforting to them, because now it's like in their minds, you know, they're feeling like, wow, this is not, I'm not making this up in my head. You know, this is not something that has never been seen before, never been experienced before. It has a name, and I'm not the only one who, you know, struggles with this issue. So for a lot of people, it brings a lot of comfort to them. It also allows them to make positive and productive connections, both with professionals. So if you have a name to what you're experiencing, then you can seek out professional help, and you can even go as far as to try and find a professional who specializes in, you know, what you're dealing with, because as mental health professionals, we do have, you know, differing areas of interest and expertise, but then also can help you make connections with other people who are sharing in a struggle with you, which is actually a huge protective factor for individuals who are struggling with their mental health, to feel as though they have social support. So they're like, when you know that you are struggling with a certain issue, now you have a name that you can use to Google support groups in your area, or, you know, just means in which you can connect with people who are sharing in your struggle and might be able to understand or be supportive in ways that the other people around you are not able to. And then, so for us as mental health professionals and just like researchers, practitioners, obviously having names for these disorders has helped us to advance in research. So not only are we now able to you know, research risk factors, whether that's genetic, because a lot of mental health disorders do indeed have genetic components, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but we can look at those genetic factors, environmental, social, and then we can also use these names to conduct research around best practices for treating certain disorders, because there are evidence-based treatments behind certain classifications of disorders. And all of that is now available to us because we started viewing mental health in a more scientific light, and identifying names and, you know, codes and all of that. So there has been some positive to diagnoses in this book coming out. So the final thing that I want to talk about in my section of this presentation is just I want to leave you guys with some tips and some words of wisdom that I like to give to my clients who are coming in and maybe are concerned about being diagnosed with something, or feeling like now they have this label. So the first thing that I like to encourage is that you are not any disorder that you have. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with familiar with people first language, but in this regard, using people first language is essentially recognizing that you are not depressed. You have depression. And by being able to talk about it in that way and view it in that way, you are, taking back that stigma that having a mental health condition defines everything about you, who you are, what you're capable of, who you're going to be in the future. And that is just not the case. And if I believe that, if counselors believe that, we wouldn't be in this field. We know that there's capacity for change. We know that there's capacity for learning that you are struggling with something, but still being able to live a fulfilling, successful, healthy life. Because, if you go to the doctor and you're diagnosed with diabetes, your life isn't over because you've been diagnosed with diabetes. Now you just know what you have and you work with your doctor to come up with your plan about how you're going to treat this, how you're going to manage it, maybe what modifications you might need to make in your life. But you're going to talk about how you can still live your life, still be a productive citizen while managing this condition that you have learned that you have. And that's the same way that we need to be looking at mental health conditions. They're a part of our total wellness, the way we have our spiritual wellness, our physical wellness, our mental wellness. It is just one facet of your health. And so, yeah, that it's always, a really, it's sad when we're working with clients and they have, bought into the stigmas around what struggling with your mental health means, when, like Dr. King said, it is so common. 1 in 5 individuals are going to experience a mental health disorder or struggle at one point in their life. And with something being so common, we need to eradicate the shame that's associated with it. And I always say that, when you attach shame to a part of you, that breeds secrecy. And then that secrecy breeds unnecessary suffering, because now you are, you're closing up, you are, going in your shell, feeling all shameful. And when you're doing that, you are missing out on so many opportunities to get the support that you need and the support that you deserve. Because if your family member came to you and they were struggling with something, even if it wasn't a mental health struggle, it was a physical struggle, I think, you would want to support them and you would want to figure out how you can do that and, not blame them for struggling with their physical illness or, making them feel bad about dealing with what they're dealing with. And yeah, we need to, together as a society, continue having these types of conversations so that we can all get to this place where mental health struggles are normalized and we can talk about them for what they are, while also acknowledging that they don't define who we are as individuals. And that's the end of my spiel. But like we said at the beginning, we want this to be a dialogue, a discourse, if you will. So we have some questions prepared if you guys don't have any questions for us, just to kind of facilitate the conversation. But if you do have a question, comment, concern, feel free to raise your hand or just put it in the chat and we will try our best to address them.
Don't be hesitant. You have 3 remarkable panelists that can probably address any question you may have.
I know someone put in there the message, as a child of the 70s and 80s, the same rules applied about family secrecy. Has anybody else dealt with the fact that you were told by your family not to share certain things, you know, and did it affect you? I know mine affected me, because I grew up, you know, I watched the Brady Bunch. That's how old I'm going to tell you I am. You know, and of course, you know, that family presented itself as a perfect little family. Of course, it was a TV show. But those things do add into our psyche and make us believe, well, my family doesn't look like that. And, you know, and they're not doing those sorts of things. So there may be something wrong with us.
So we do have a question. For people who do not have a background in mental health issues, do you have any advice on how to help people who are struggling with these?
So
Iris, did you want?
Absolutely. So that is a tough one that a lot of people struggle with. And every single mental health issue kind of manifests in its own way. And so I can't, you know, tell you, oh, if such and such has this, then you do this. There's no formula to it. But I think the biggest thing is recognizing what you said in your question, which is the limitation that you don't have a background in mental health issues. So you're not expected to be a professional to someone in your life. What you can do, though, is be a friend and be someone who is willing to listen, someone who is willing to offer, you know, positive regard in spite of the fact that this person is struggling, because that's important. Letting them know, you know, I hear you, I see you, I know that you're struggling, but that doesn't change my view of you. That doesn't make me think any less of you. So just kind of being that neutral, open, non-judgmental friend. But then to take it a step further, you know, if you know that this person is struggling in a way that is maybe putting their safety or their health at risk, you can also, you know, try your best. You can't force anyone to do anything, but you can try your best to help that person connect with professional resources. If you're a student here on campus, I'm in the counseling center. We are here. You know, give us a call. You can, you know, do some research, maybe just try and make that help feel just a little bit more accessible to that person, you know, whether it's you going the extra mile of looking up some numbers of places they can call, hotlines, resources, whatever. Be willing to, for example, if you have a friend who has been wanting to go to the counseling center but is, you know, scared, be an accountability friend and let them know that you are more than happy to walk with them to the counseling center. If that will help it seem less scary. So just whatever you can do within what you can do, remembering that you do have limitations, and make sure you're not beating yourself up over that.
Iris, that's what I was going to say, is just making sure that, you know, that you give them information on resources on campus. I don't know if everyone in this forum recognizes the counseling center, which is in Gillum Hall on the second floor. Iris, just does can the friend make a referral? Do you guys contact students who haven't contacted you directly? If that student is reluctant and their friend is worried, can they refer information to you? How does that work?
Let me offer one option. There is the Sycamore's Cares. So you can confidentially, anonymously refer a student, and they will check on that student, do a wellness check. Okay. And considering it just depends on your comfort level with public safety officers, police officers. You can actually make a referral to the police department, and they know how to connect people that are not students. But the counseling center can point you on campus or externally. They can point you any direction that person needs to go to. I'm sorry.
Yolanda, what is that called? Sycamore Cares? Is there a
it's
website?
On the Division of Student Affairs website. If you go to the Division of Student Affairs, it will have a referral button right there. There you go.
I sent
Lauren
the
Banks
link in the
just put
chat.
it in there. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you for coming through.
Iris, do you faculty and staff besides students? What about faculty and staff? What resources do they
So-
have?
For faculty and staff, they would need to contact Amy Demchek, who's over employee wellness.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they have 5 free for faculty and staff. I'm sorry, I look a mess, so I'm not supposed to be a panelist. But faculty and staff actually have 5 free counseling sessions through Root Clinic. Now, I think it's 3 if it's offsite, but you would contact Amy Demchek, who is the employee wellness coordinator in HR. And I have her number and email address that I could put it in. I'll put it also in the chat. But there are EAP services available for faculty and staff.
Okay, because I know years ago there was an actual EAP office that was staffed and run, and they partnered with some of the health clinics outside of ISU, and just like you indicated, Lauren, and in that time period, you were actually allowed 5 visits. And you could actually bring your family member if you were having a problem with your daughter or son or, husband. So, but I hadn't checked recently to see what was available. So thank you, Lauren.
We're open for the next question.
You can type it in if you don't want to speak.
Sorry, I actually do have a question.
All right, Caitlin.
Yes. So besides going to counseling or going to talk to someone for help, what would you suggest someone could do for their day-to-day activities in order to help their mental health?
I know for me personally, then, Iris, I'm going to defer to you because this is your job. But I have read and I've also engaged in exercise. Walking, we have a beautiful campus at ISU, and that I know, well, of course, times have changed a little bit with COVID, but at one point there were some groups that would get together at lunch and do some, walking. And, I know that at least for me personally, that is helpful to change my surroundings a little bit and get out. I tell you, this time of year is not the best for me. I don't care for winter. I miss the sun, and I think there's, Iris, in there an actual affliction, if you will, that is related to lack of vitamin C in the air, and you find yourself being a little bit more down than you normally would. There are days I look out and go, my God, if it's gray one more day, what am I going to do? But that's my take, is I believe that, some sort of activity, to drag yourself away. We've all had to work from home and do Zoom where we're, lounging in our pajama pants and, and sometimes it helps to get dressed and get up and move around. That's my take.
Yeah, and someone in the comments said the rec center has a fantastic track to walk on indoors.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dr. King, I agree with you. Of course, physical activity is always, a positive. Well, let me not say always, because everything can be done to excess. But in general, physical exercise has a positive impact on mental health. And you're right, Dr. King. We do have seasonal affective disorder, which is a type of depression that typically reoccurs around the fall, winter time.
Yeah, the acronym is SAD, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, SAD.
Yeah.
And that is, yes, because of decreased sunlight. So especially during these winter months, if you can try and catch as much sunlight as possible during the day, so getting out of your apartment or whatever, that's always a positive. And then if you actually have a severe case of seasonal affective disorder, we actually have I forget what they're called, but they're therapy lamps that emit light that's similar to sunshine. Yeah, so in severe cases, we would use that, but just other general day-to-day things. Like I mentioned in my portion of the presentation, having social support is so important. We are, as human beings, we were created for connection. And so, you know, identifying those safe people in your life. And, you know, you can have people in your life that serve different functions, if you will. So you don't have to, you know, you don't have to tell every single friend in your life all of your business, but, you know, discern who is someone who you can trust on a deeper level, and find those people that you can confide in if you're really struggling, or, you know, you just want a more intimate connection where you can reveal more about yourself. So that's always a good couple people to have in your life. But then just other people who you draw positive energy from, whether, you know, whether it's that they make you laugh a lot, or, you know, you guys share similar hobbies. So just having those supports, getting out and doing things with those people and cultivating those relationships is always positive. Diet actually well, I mean, it should make sense because body, mind, spirit, all connected, but diet does or can play a big role in mental health. You know, you don't have to be perfect, but definitely, you know, trying to eat quality, nutritious foods has a positive impact on our mental functioning and our emotional functioning as well. Finding moments in the day where you can just pause and practice gratitude, which I feel is kind of like a buzzword right now in our society, but there is research behind gratitude that, you know, even just spending 5 minutes in your day to intentionally stop thinking about everything that's going wrong and rather be thankful for what is going right and what you do have can make such a huge difference in your attitude, which then has an impact on how the rest of your day goes. So those are just some basic tips.
I tell my kids all the time that, you know, I call it stinking thinking. When you find yourself focusing completely on negativity, try your best to focus on something that's, you know, that's good. In my case, I have a almost 2-year-old granddaughter. So I'll pull out pictures of her and, you know, or videos of her, you know, just being a 2-year-old. There's nothing more than a toddler with no cares in the world that will brighten your day. Another thing, Caitlin, that I do a lot when I drive into work, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And some of my audiobooks are self-help. They are positive. And that really helps me get my mind off of maybe what's bothering me. And as somebody mentioned about the track at the arena, you know, get some headphones and, you know, and have some music, or, you know, put an audiobook on, you know, and that can certainly help to make a change. While we're social distancing, it's really hard to kind of get together with our girlfriends like we used to, and you know, and just kind of talk things out. So, you know, these are different times, but they don't always have to be difficult times. You know, we can figure out ways to feed our mental positive health in those ways.
Excellent.
Can I
Chantrice?
mention one thing? I'm so sorry. Or Chantrice.
Can you come right after Chantrice? Don't forget Amanda. Okay. Chantrice? Don't make me look like I just made you up. So, okay, Amanda, go ahead, and hopefully Chantrice will unmute. Like
I think she's trying to talk. It's just her computers.
Okay. Oh, I see her. She's like this. No, I can't. We can't hear you.
Okay, I'm just gonna go while she figures that out. To Caitlin's point, so I'm in the dietetics program at Indiana State, and I am going to be graduating in May and going into eating disorders and disordered eating. And I want to say that, you know, when you have mental struggles, there's a lot of voices in your head. And so speaking all at once, and it can sometimes be very chaotic. And I just want to say, to Iris's point, being very mindful and just being present can be extremely helpful, and taking one moment, like one task at a time.
Right.
And there's this app called Headspace. If you can't afford therapy, with a dietitian, with a therapist, with whoever, Headspace has an app that you can download, and it's for meditation and mindfulness and teaches you just how to be present and in the moment. It also talks about mindful eating, which I think is a very important thing that we incorporate right now with eating disorders being so prevalent. So I just wanted to say that, but you know, exercise and incorporating gentle nutrition, but still not being restrictive and all of that stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to add.
Amanda's Headspace say free download or?
Yeah, it's a free download. I don't know if you have to pay a prescription, but sometimes, like I work part-time at Starbucks, they will actually cover the app for me. So if maybe your work or there's a lot of mental programs with corporations going on right now. And then they also have it on Netflix right now. So they will take you through guided meditation at the beginning of the half. It talks about the science behind and the psychology behind being mindful. And then the second half is the guided meditation. So
that's perfect, because we have the student health promotion director on the line. So that is so her and Iris's ballpark. So that's perfect, but I'll add it to the resources that I'm collecting from every session.
Okay.
Chantrice.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to add, as far as like assistance, like setting boundaries, as a way to like kind of help improve your mental health. Given that I've entered a new role, I have 3 sets of student populations that I work with now, so my schedule gets a little hectic. But I made sure to advocate for myself to make sure I have flex time. And so me and my supervisor, we have a worked out agreement that I'll add it to my calendar. So when she knows I'm not in the office, it's me taking time for myself. Either I had a program or a staff meeting or had to do duty or whatever the case may be, making sure I'm advocating for myself. So I just wanted to share that as a way to make sure that you focus, you set aside time, and don't be afraid to set boundaries, say no, whether it's with classes or with work. I find it's been very helpful in my transition. I mean, I've only been here a month, but it's been very helpful for me to accomplish my personal goals as well as keep me grounded to grow within my position.
Yeah, that is a good point, that sometimes we do take on more than we should. And I think as women, particularly, who've had to wear many, many hats at different times, like I indicated earlier, you know, as a full-time student with 3 little girls at home and a full-time job, sometimes I just didn't know the word no. And I really had to learn to say, you know, I can't do that this week, or, you know, I can't do that next week. So, you know, Chantrice, that's a good reminder that we need to set boundaries that are healthy for ourselves. And as women, we need to recognize that we can't always be Wonder Woman, you know, so.
Yeah, and I think too, I don't know what the majority, like major program of study is on this call, but people who go into helping professions, whether, you know, that's being a teacher, a healthcare worker, or anything like that, we also kind of have that same struggle of really wanting to be there for other people, wanting to help however we can. It's a part of our identity that, you know, we have a lot of value in, and that's great because it makes us great at what we do. But at the same time, we have to step back and remember that, you know, we can't pour from that empty cup, and we have to find ways that we are refueling our energy, our mental capacity, our emotional capacity, because we're just as important as the people that we're trying to help. And I think it's really easy to lose sight of that. And then something else I wanted to say that goes back to the conversation around mindfulness and Headspace was just that, so Headspace is a great app, but just so people know, in case Headspace isn't accessible, and Calm is another good one. Thanks, Dr. Irvin. If for whatever reason, having one of these apps is not accessible to you, there's also so much online on YouTube that's free as far as guided meditations. And they have them they have like just general ones. They have ones that are specific for right before bed. I've even seen some around specific struggles. So guided meditation for anxiety, for fear, for this, for that. So, you know, just wanted to let you guys know there's a lot of free stuff out there too.
Okay, we had a hand up and then we have a question in chat. Leah, was that your hand up earlier?
I tried to raise my hand, but I didn't see my hand go up. So I didn't
I'm
quite know
sorry,
if I had that or not.
Real quick, yeah.
I'm a non-traditional grad student. I'm 53. My kid has left the house. So I'm in my last semester right now. I'm getting ready to graduate with my MPA in May. And one of the things that I have found, even before this pandemic, is the extreme tired feeling all the time. I have a variety of different health issues, migraines I've had for years, different health issues, and I've had depression since I was younger. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was having panic attacks when I was probably in elementary school, the day before the first day of school. You just can't sleep and you get all nervous and whatnot. And I never really understood what those were until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. What do you say to people when they criticize you for having to lie down and take a nap in the middle of the day because you're trying to take care of yourself, and you get to a point like I'm at right now where if I don't lie down for at least an hour in the middle of the daytime, I'm not functional for the rest of the day.
And you're doing this on your time, your lunch hour, you know, so you're not, you know, putting
Well,
yourself.
I'm a full-time grad student, so basically.
Okay. Well, I'm remembering when we shared an office together.
Yeah, when we shared an office, and I would close my door and lie down on the floor with a yoga mat and a pillow and a blanket. Yes.
Right. Well, I think that goes back to what Iris was saying, is, you know, in terms of self-care. And, you know, I believe self-care, and again, we didn't really touch on the gender issue, that we as women, and particularly we tend to go more into those fields that are helping fields, because we raise children, we take care of our parents. That's not to say that our male counterparts don't, but, you know, studies have shown that
our male counterparts. They're our biggest children.
That's true. Yeah. But no, I think that you have to be comfortable and you have to be confident in saying, I need this time. You know, Iris and Oyibo, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but it took me a long time to recognize that it's okay, particularly when my children got out of the time frame where they needed that care, because they were toddlers and they were children as they became teenagers and college students. I had to set boundaries, you know, because I was being just overwhelmed.
Right. Well, I just saw Lauren's message in the chat. Naps are great if they're done correctly. I always say, well, I'm only going to lie down for 30 minutes and 2 hours later I wake up. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm trying to not nap incessantly. However, if I don't, then my body doesn't work. And then do I sleep well at night? Probably not. So I don't.
Yeah.
So I think, so I want to make sure we get to some of the questions that have been put in the chat box, but to your question or your comment, Leah, and then also alluding to Lauren's comment in the chat about naps. Naps can be positive self-care tools. Like Lauren said, they just have to be done correctly. So a 3-hour nap is probably going to debilitate you for the rest of your day, because you're going to need like another 3 hours to like actually wake back up and get back to your day. But a 30-minute nap, quick, you know, little timed energy boosters, those are usually will help give you more energy for your day. But okay, so we have this question we have a couple questions. So one says, I'm a grad student in school counseling. What is some advice you can give for those who are helpers? I'm pretty overwhelmed now with my job in school and practicum. How can I be sure to give all I can to my students, but also fill my own cup with my limited amount of time? So with that, it kind of relates to what we just talked about, and I think someone even said it in the chat in response, but schedule some time for yourself, and you figure out what you need to do to fill your cup, because not everyone is a nap taker. And I think that's another thing we have to remember, that all of us have different self-care strategies that work for us. So for one person, it might be that 30-minute nap, but for another person, a 30-minute workout might do for them what that nap would do for the other person. So figuring out what you need to do for your mind and to re-energize, and making sure that you're scheduling that into your day. Because especially when you're in grad school, and I remember, you want to sustain this for the rest of your life. So you can't burn out in grad school. Like you have to learn in grad school, this is the career I'm going into. So how am I going to be able to make this, last? I need to figure out how to make this work for myself. And then also,
it's a good time now while you're in grad school, before you get into that profession that can be very overwhelming. And I'm really appreciative of all of the ideas of the different apps out there. But 30 minutes, I'm not a napper, I can't nap. But if I can sit for 15 minutes on a break and listen to something that is soothing and calming, that's going to help me. And, like Iris indicated, everybody's different, and what helps them. And you have to figure that out. And you also have to do, in my opinion, not feel guilty. And again, it goes back to me as a woman thing. We are always feeling like we're not doing enough. And we really have to work on that and recognize that we can only do as much as we can. And then implement the things that work for us. So again, I'm not a napper, but a 30-minute session of some type of Audible is very helpful to me.
Yeah, and don't forget that helpers need helpers. So you're in grad school, the counseling center is accessible to you. I have a therapist, therapists need therapists, everyone needs a therapist. So reach out if you need it.
That's a great point.
This conversation could go on and on and on. And I'm appreciative of the panelists. I appreciate the questions. What I will do, I will copy all of the questions. I'll send them to the panelists, and I'll provide your email contact so you can get additional contacts from the panelists. If you put your questions in there, that's what I will do.
Right.
But
I have a question for Leah. Leah, what is Simple Habit? Is that a app?
That's another app. I've used Headspace. I didn't care for it.
Okay.
I liked Simple Habit better because it deals with, like, you can do a 5-minute meditation on, I'm stressed out at work.
Oh, okay.
My coworker's driving me insane.
Hey, are you going back to when we worked together?
Yes. Specifically, yes. Like different things, like they've had stuff for the coronavirus, specifically just for the pandemic. Wow. What to do if you're feeling overwhelmed about the pandemic. And
Alonda,
I think there's
remind us of all these apps that people have put out.
Yeah. Yes, I am. And Iris was about to go to that one last question from JC.
Okay. Well, it wasn't a question, but it was a great point.
Okay.
JC said that as someone that has had depression since I was little, I just try to own it. If I need to stay in bed on a bad day, I need it. Know your worth and value your time. Sometimes relaxing is needed. And I just thought that was a great point. Listen to your body.
Great point. That's awesome.
Okay, can I get all my presenters back? I'm going to gallery view now so I can see all of these smiling faces that have stuck with us valiantly. I appreciate the history, I appreciate the context, and I appreciate the advice. I want to thank you from 100% bottom of my heart, and the participants. This just goes to show you, this program was created to address radical self-care for Black women. But if you look at the names and the faces, we have far outreach just radical care for Black women. This is radical care for women. And we have to understand we must take care of ourselves. We must take that time, because stress can make you feel like you're one of those stigmas, that you're not good enough and you can't make it, I'm sick. So we have to take care of ourselves, and that's my focus. Thank you, Leah. We're creating other forms of radical care. We're going to talk to our white women. We're going to talk to our Hispanic Latino women, and we're going to figure out all of these women populations. Are there different topics? Because some resonate with some communities while others don't. So we're going to hit everybody. So please stay engaged. Yolanda's online. Azizi Harrington is online. Lauren is online. Those are part of this conversation from the beginning. And you will definitely not want to miss the next one with Yolanda Williams.
Oyibo, do you have a question?
Please, I have to go. I'm the only one in the office. And it's
Okay, no, I'm about to.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I'm about to release you all. I appreciate your attendance. The recording will be on our MSP YouTube channel, and it does come with closed captioning if you need in different languages. You just need to let us know.
I want to thank you, Dr. Irvin. This is so important, and I'm glad that we could get together. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. Good night.